Thank you.
Yeah.
To bring it in line with things that are happening within the affected communities. So just to say that. The Portland metro area, including Beaverton, rest on traditional village sites of the Kalapuya, Multnomah, Wasco, Cowlitz, Cathlamet, Clackamas, bands of Chinook, Tualatin, Molalla, and many other tribes who made their homes along the Columbia River and its tributaries. We recognize the systemic policies of genocide, relocation, and assimilation that still impact many indigenous Native American families today. We thank these tribes for being stewards and protectors of these lands for thousands of years. Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's really meaningful, and I really appreciate the work that you've done in getting us started on this, and that you've done in conjunction with Dori as the refining process goes on. Joy, it's all yours.
Yes, did all voting members receive a copy of the minutes from last month that Spencer submitted? Are there any corrections? Hearing none, I make a motion that the minutes be approved as sent. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Great. I also saw Tanya, so we have a third.
Okay.
So the motion on the floor is to adopt the minutes from last month. All in favor, raise your hand. Okay. Lower your hand. All opposed, raise your hand. Are there any abstentions? Motion carries.
Cool. Thank you so much. No public comment right now. So we could go ahead and move on. So I know Councilor Hasan is in Texas for a wedding. She said she would try to jump in, but I'm going to assume that that wedding is too hype right now, and so that's why she's not here. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you, Lieutenant Stellingwerf.
All right, good evening. I don't have a whole lot. It sounds like before we started the meeting, there was some mention of the Pride event. I think it was very successful. I stopped by, my wife and I did, and we had obviously some police participation. We had a booth, and for all intents and purposes, it sounds like it went very well with everyone for being the first event for the city in a long, long time. It was refreshing to be out around folks and doing stuff around the library like we did, seemed like a decade ago. So it was pretty cool. And we got a lot of good feedback. The traffic wasn't a problem. Everything went off fairly smoothly. So very pleased with that. The only other thing really on the horizon here as far as events go is National Night Out. We're doing a different National Night Out this year. It's kind of a hybrid. We're not going to have stuff at the library after I just talked about having fun stuff at the library. But it's going to be kind of your own neighborhood. So if your neighborhood's having some type of event and they wish to have some officers come by and socialize a little bit, maybe bring some swag, talk to the kids, talk to the neighbors. It'll be a more intimate event. You can go online to request that. Consuela Starr, I think you've met. She'll arrange all that kind of stuff. So that's what we're going to try this year. Hopefully next year we'll be back to normal and doing it in a larger scope at a city park or library. But that's mailbox, community services. Well, I'll just tell you, it's a long email, so I'll put it in the chat for everyone. So if you and your neighbors are having something you'd like us to come by, we'd love to come by. Just let us know. Thank you.
So, Lieutenant, can you say that last part again? If in your neighborhood, if the neighbors are having some event we'd like you to come over.
Well, yeah. So in the past, National Night Out, it was usually the National Night Out. Neighbors come out, they celebrate public safety. It's not about police. It's about the neighborhoods and getting to know your neighbors, and because knowing your neighbors are safe neighbors and so on and so forth. And obviously the police department gets involved. It evolved through the years to a big event that we have at the park. But now there are some neighborhoods that celebrate the National Night Out event. So rather than having a centralized event, we're going back to the old model of going out to the neighborhoods and chatting with the different neighborhoods and getting to know people. More, like I said, a more intimate event.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Lieutenant. It's funny, you're not at your office anymore, but that sound keeps following you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. I was monkeying with it for about a half hour before the meeting, and I just don't know. I think it's time for a new computer.
Really high frequency.
I work for the government. What can I say?
Cool. Amy, I know you're in summer right now, but I'm not sure if there's any updates you'd like to share from Emiab Youth.
Yeah, so I mean, we're on our summer break right now, but I do just want to say I was able to sit in on the interviews for the new MEAB members, and I'm so excited about what we'll be doing next year. Everyone is super passionate, so I'm really optimistic.
Cool. Let us know how that goes. And I think too, one of the things that I know there's a big push this year for a lot of the recruitment. And so I think that HRAC is a place too where you could lean on for additional recruitment for that. I know we have educators in here as well as parents. The other thing I just want to say, I ordered, Joy mentioned shirts earlier. So Spencer had sent over a design for some tie-dye shirts. And the original request was, let's get a few shirts so that we could use it for Pride. I just went ahead and got everybody shirts. So that includes you as well, Amy and Lieutenant. I would love to see, I think the tack vests that BPD wear are really cool, but I think tie-dye underneath would be really cool to see. And I think Lieutenant Stellingwerf could lead the way. That's just a proposal. And then, yep, there it is. There it is right there. So huge thank you, Spencer, for that was a good idea. I haven't been spending your food money anywhere, so that was a great place to spend it. So I have shirts for everybody. You'll just coordinate with me and how you actually get that shirt. You're more than welcome to stop by the City Hall building. If you weren't here earlier when Joy had mentioned, apparently the shirts are leaking or they're like, yeah, they're leaking, right? Isn't that what you said?
They run. They're tie-dyed, so they'll run. Like I was pouring water on myself at Pride and running. So my shorts got all tie-dyed too, which was fine, but it washes right out. So give it a wash.
Yep.
And I don't think during that day it would have mattered if you were pouring water on yourself or not, quite frankly.
It was so hot.
Yeah.
For the city update, so there was a few that I sent your way already, but the one I'm going to choose to highlight because I'm so stoked about, the Beaverton Night Market is back in person this year. So I'm not sure if y'all have been part of the night market before or have attended before, but it's an event that it can always attract several thousand people each night. And so this year it's going to be on Southwest 1st Street and Southwest Tucker. So it's kind of like a block party, if you will. And it's going to be on Friday, August 13th, and then Saturday, August 14th. So it's back to back this time, not every Saturday or Saturday, not 2 Saturdays like it was in the past. So yeah, if you want any more information on that or want to know who are some of the vendors that are going to be there, beavertonoregon.gov/night market. I will say too, if you are on the Facebook, you could just search that event. Type, I think you say going, right, or interested, one of those things, and then you get all the updates for that event. And often the updates also include sneak peeks from vendors and performers of who's going to be there. So totally encourage you all to go to the night market. I will be there. That's all I've got. Any other questions before we move on? Cool. I love the efficiency. All right.
Spencer?
I'm here.
Well, we are looking forward to hearing your legislative bill recap. That was an important piece that you sent out, and I appreciate you taking the time to summarize it for us.
Pleasure.
And while Spencer is looking for that, I'll just also echo, thank you, Spencer, for doing this. None of us asked, and Spencer just said, hey, I have all this information as it pertains to the recommendations. So thank you, Spencer, for just taking that on your own.
Well, I think it just shows the timing was right, because while we were concluding our work, legislators were introducing bills that impact policing across the state. So you all received with the minutes and stuff a brief outline. I thought I'd just provide a little bit more detail. So Senate Bill 204, which discusses access to police reports. It allows civilian or community oversight boards that are designated to investigate officer misconduct to access the law enforcement data system, which includes police encounters and arrests, and it goes into effect January 1st. This most clearly intersects with our recommendation 2A regarding a data dashboard, but also with 2E regarding oversight, in that we're recommending an oversight board be established, and then this would impact how that operates. Senate Bill 621, Civilian Oversight Agencies. It upholds local laws on community oversight boards that are set up to oversee police discipline and other things. So it intersects or brushes against our recommendation 2E regarding oversight. And once an oversight board is established by the city, then it'll be recognized as legal by the state. House Bill 2162 deals with police training and accreditation. It directs the Department of Public Safety Standards and Training to develop a statewide equity training program for police officers. And it goes on about adding people to the Board of Public Safety. This is also where it hits us a little bit. Provides that police officer certification may be denied, suspended, or revoked if an officer has been fired for use of excessive force, abuse of authority, or discriminatory policing. So this intersects with our recommendation 3A and B regarding hiring and retaining officers from underrepresented groups. And certainly 1A and C, A being 8 can't wait regarding escalated force. I missed that one in the outline. House Bill 2417, crisis intervention. This intersects with 1B regarding funding social services. It doesn't exactly fall into that, but it's certainly something worth discussing, because it requires OHA, the Oregon Health Authority, to provide grants to cities to fund community mental health programs to operate mobile crisis intervention teams. It will require the OHA to establish a center to receive calls, texts, and chats. Chats from the 988 suicide prevention line. It's effective July 1st, which was like last week, so it's already in force. And there's a $15 million cost. It drew bipartisan support across both houses. House Bill 2575 also touches on 1B regarding funding social services. This bill is regarding trauma-informed training, directs the Department of Justice to establish a program for awarding grants to law enforcement agencies and cities to train groups that interact with people who've experienced trauma. This was overwhelmingly approved by both houses. It directly impacts our recommendation, and because it provides monies to cities and and law enforcement agencies, I suspect that we have to apply as a city or as a police, as a law enforcement agency. So that needs to be figured out, and figured out right now, because it's already in force, and people are lining up, and we need to get in line. Trauma-informed training, I can't imagine anything more critical.
And money, funds to actually do something with. That's
Yeah.
great news.
But we have to raise our hand and ask, I suspect.
And $1 million is not a lot of money to, it'll be interesting to see how people go after this. Trauma-informed care can be very intensive, and are we going to be doing this with officers or with, I didn't quite understand where the money's going to go to, what groups are going to be trained.
Got it. With that in mind, I'm presenting this with an eye toward which of us, who of us, all of us can pick a favorite bill or two and show up on a Tuesday evening at City Council to point out to Council exactly how the bill is affected by our report and recommendations. House Bill 2929, duty to intervene. That's a slam dunk for 8 Can't Wait. Requires a police officer who witnesses another officer engaging in misconduct or a violation of the state's minimum moral fitness standards to report it to a supervisor within 72 hours. A police agency must complete an investigation within 3 months and report findings of misconduct that rise above minor violations to the state. That won't be effective until January, but obviously BPD will need to work on that. And City Council needs to know. It's coming, it's there. House Bill 2930 places restrictions on arbitrators. You may have noticed last week that in Portland, an officer who was fired last year for misconduct was reinstated this past week, or was ordered reinstated by the arbitrator on the case. So this restricts the power of arbitrators, requires arbitrators to uphold disciplinary decisions by a police agency unless the arbitrator finds they were, quote, arbitrary and capricious. So this is a move in a direction toward maintaining discipline that personally I find really cool. So that takes effect upon the governor's signature, which could be any second. So once again, City Council needs to be made aware that this is all over us. Our recommendations 1A, B, and C regarding transparency certainly come closest to this particular bill. House Bill 2932, use of force reports. Once again, an 8 Can't Wait slam dunk. So, but also 1C regarding escalating force. This bill directs law enforcement agencies to participate in the FBI's national use of force data collection and directs the Oregon Criminal Justice Commission to analyze the FBI data and report annually to the legislature. It's effective in January 1. House Bill 2936, background checks, directs the Department of Public Safety Standards and Training to create a uniform background checklist and a standardized personal history questionnaire for people applying to become public safety officers. Our recommendation number 3 and its subparts is all regarding hiring of officers. That's effective already, as it was effective July 1st. So everybody in the city needs to be aware of that, including council and BPD. House Bill 2986 is regarding bias crimes training. Once again, that's our Roman numeral 3 regarding training. Directs the state's police training academy to train police to identify, report, and investigate crimes motivated by prejudice based on perceived race, color, religion, national origin, sexual orientation, gender, marital status, political affiliation or beliefs, membership or activity in or behalf of labor organizations or against a labor organization, physical or mental disability, age, economic or social status, or citizenship of the victim. So regarding training, BPD will need to be brought up to speed on that, and certainly City Council needs to be very much aware of it for policy purposes. That becomes effective January 1st. House Bill 3145 regarding misconduct records. This comes up against our recommendations 2A, B, and C regarding transparency. It requires a police agency to report within 10 days to the Department of Public Safety and Standards if an officer is suspended or faces any disciplinary economic sanction. So that's our recommendation regarding transparency. That's it as far as I can tell regarding intersections between our report and recommendations and the bills that passed. There are a couple that caught my eye. House Bill 3059 regards unlawful assembly. It sets out that a sheriff, deputies, a mayor, or executive officer may order people to disperse if any 5 or more people assemble unlawfully. If people don't disperse, they may then the officers may arrest people for unlawful activity, but they're not required to do so. House Bill 3265 is regarding sanctuary policies. Prohibits police from denying, and I'm not sure how it really applies because Beaverton's identified as a sanctuary city, and I'm not far enough into the weeds on that definition to quite understand. But this prohibits police from denying services, benefits, privileges, etc. to people on the basis of federal civil immigration actions. It prohibits inquiring about a person's citizenship status without connection to a criminal investigation. And probably most important, prohibits providing information about someone in custody to a federal immigration authority or using public resources to assist federal immigration enforcement. That's effective upon the governor's signature, so that could be any second. I think you guys can see how those might apply to the work that we do in general. Finally, I have a mea culpa. We've spent a lot of time talking about school resource officers, and we're very much aware that that the city has kicked that over to the school district, which will be conducting about a 12-month research project with consultants and doing interviews and surveys of parents and students and teachers and administrators in order for the school district to decide what they want to do about SROs. My my legislative bill search was based on searching for the keyword of police. It never occurred to me until last weekend that I might take a look at using a keyword of schools. There was Senate Bill 238 was introduced. It would have prohibited school districts from contracting with law enforcement agencies to provide SROs. It died in the Senate Education Committee, and I couldn't tell if there was even a hearing. But can we all imagine one or two of our crew here, or not here tonight, testifying and the kind of impact that that would have had. I can. If it had passed, we wouldn't be waiting for the school district to do a study, and the police department would be saving $1 million. That's it for me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Again, I would love to see
Mhm.
many or all of us taking the bills that we find most interesting to City Council for public remarks.
Thank you, Spencer. That was a lot of research, and when you initially brought this forward, I was startled by how many of our recommendations actually coincided with legislature that is now in place. Kathy?
Yes, I'm wondering if there's a way for Spencer to get on the agenda to just walk the city council through this, as you just walked us through it.
Well, I don't know. Councilor Hasan might. I would have, I think individually we get 3 minutes to talk.
Lots of branches of the city and county government come and make small presentations at city council.
And I know we did the same thing when we presented our report, didn't we?
Yes.
6
And
months ago.
yes, and they're a bit behind, council is, and you just presenting this would be a non-aggressive way of just bringing it up a bit. They've been wondering what went on in the legislature. They don't individually keep up with it.
Right. At their last, at the meeting last week, which was a roundtable, it was, this
If you say so.
subject was mentioned, and it wasn't exactly blown off, but it was made clear that the council was going to have staff and the city attorney's office review all of that, and at some point in the future, undefined, present a report.
Mhm.
Yes.
Can we, as a commission, request a timeline that we would like to see it in 6 months, or as a commission, we're concerned that this, may be put on a back burner and concerned that it moves forward quicker than later?
Joy, you've been all over the council for a while.
Yeah, I kind of haunt them, and I'm going to talk later. I have some questions for them, of course. I like to ask good questions. I don't usually get any answers. I also would just say, short of getting on the agenda, which for many reasons is problematic at the moment, I would say when you go to the City of Beaverton, the City Council page, there's a place where you can click and send an email. It sends it to all of the City Council members, the mayor's office, and the city attorney's office. So if you happen to have questions about stuff like, gosh, what is the question I have here? What is the process in place to implement new state laws? Or how are you bringing this up? Or we made these recommendations. You can send an email and everyone gets it. And if many people send it and everyone gets it, pretty soon they can't ignore us to death anymore.
And at last, we're joined by the woman who knows stuff.
Yes.
Don't feel alone.
Fun. Thank you. And we're hopeful also to get an update too. So you may have some words of wisdom to share with us about this topic, but we'll circle back also because we'd like to get the liaison update.
Yes. So first of all, I will confess I am in Texas. We have a family wedding this week, so I'm actually up in a bedroom hiding from the first night of many that is wedding celebrations. But I knew I had to be here for at least as much as I could be, because I know many of you watched the meeting, which felt like a year ago now, but I would say 2 weeks ago. And I would share, obviously, if I, didn't in that meeting, or if you didn't sense it, obviously my disappointment as well. I felt like there was a moment where we started reading your recommendations, which I didn't feel like we had really done, to talk about them, because I don't know that we've really done that as a council. So I was a little bummed that we didn't really go through that process. That said, just listening to Spencer, I think what I'm going to do is try to get a recap from someone within staff around how the specific House bill, things that passed around police reform, how those will be implemented, because we know that needs to happen. It's not that it doesn't, it's just a matter of someone doing it. So a to-do that I have personally is to kind of reach out to figure out who I would direct and or get that information from.
Wouldn't it be the city attorney?
I think so.
She's here
Probably in partnership with maybe someone from the ledge staff and or BPD. I will say I don't know for sure. I do think that a lot of this in sort of flux continues, quite honestly, and I feel like a broken record, but I'll just say it, is we are in an interim city manager. Even in this moment, we don't necessarily have, Kurt is our interim city manager, but he is kind of in two places, because he's supporting us right now, sort of as interim, but truly on his way in transitioning out his role to the new city manager, who will start at the end of August. I did feel like when I saw the oversight bills or some stuff around, there was like a specific bill around oversight and oversight commission, that it was providing some direction around what we could do or should do. So I'm hopeful to have a conversation with a couple different people to get that moving. I actually think that that's something that can probably move, or I would like to make that move if I can. I would add, just on the comments of like ways to lobby or ways to speak up, if you would like to send a letter as a group, you are certainly welcome to. If you want to email us individually, you are also welcome to do that. As I believe Spencer or Joy mentioned, citymail@beavertonoregon.gov is a mechanism to reach all of us. Those emails do get forwarded to us directly to make sure that we see them. I don't know that they get sent to the mayor as well, so it might be worth adding the mayor mail email address as well. I don't know about next Tuesday's agenda in terms of like the robustness of it. It's my understanding a lot of stuff is moving really quickly. And because we've sort of are in this interim city manager, a bunch of people are trying to get a bunch of things on the agenda to make sure that things get addressed. So one of those things is ARPA funding, because we have received some of our ARPA funding and have yet to identify how we'll be using ARPA funding. The other thing I did want to make sure I gave you an opportunity just to kind of to put out there is we did have that sort of special emergency meeting last Wednesday, which was a discussion on fireworks and the banning of fireworks in the city. Council chose not to move forward with the ban. A lot of different reasons why. I think enforcement was a big part of it. I also think the city limits are more complicated than people realize. You could be on 185th and TV Highway and suddenly you're not in the city of Beaverton. So what does that look like? So it's very important to me that you all feel like you can have access to me or ask me questions or come to me with your concerns. I will do my best to try to continue to move them forward. But I wanted to give this space today to make sure if you had questions or comments that you could. So I'll pause now and see if you have any comments or questions.
Oh, did you ask for questions?
Yeah, go ahead, Spencer.
I forgot to raise my hand. Regarding oversight and your enthusiasm for it, I think mine and perhaps a couple other people's concern is that it will be made subject to a lengthy consultancy contract in order for, I don't know, in order for counselors to feel comfortable that they're doing the right thing. Certainly, I think we'd prefer to see it happen sooner than that, but you know, we all know how long that can take. So what are your thoughts?
I will say one of the things that excited me about Jenny was the work that she had done around police advisory work in Tracy. I don't know the detail of that work. I believe it was my understanding from her materials that she submitted that it was in response to everything. Please don't quote me for 100%, but I got the impression that she had really been able to rally community and put some work together around it. So that's what I was excited about and continue to be excited about. So I think what the challenge will be, Spencer, to be super honest with you, is who gets to sit on that and how and why, right? So do we let Spencer sit on it? Maybe I don't want Spencer on it, right? And do I get to choose, right? Does the chief of police get to choose? Like that, I think is like probably where we're going to see the most sort of contentious conversation, because you can make a border commission be what you want it to be, or you can make a border commission representative of the voices that you want to hear. And that, I think, will be an obstacle, which we will have to get through when that time comes. I'd be curious if you or others had thoughts on cities who have done oversight well. I think while we look at Portland a lot, Portland still is not the sort of like people don't necessarily see Portland as the example. And so I'm always looking for cities and municipalities that have done it differently or have a similar makeup to Beaverton to be a better way to say, let's do this. Sometimes I think some things that come from Portland, people sort of roll their eyes from. So I try to look for other stuff. So if you ever have stuff that you see, I'd be super curious to see it. But I am kind of through several degrees of separation. Like Rep Bynum has a chief of, I think it's her chief of staff, like very aware of the work that they're doing and really excited about what they've done. We just need to figure out how to get it, into Beaverton so that we're also, one, in compliance, and two, building trust with our communities. I can't see raised hands, so feel free to pop in because I am on my cell phone. Yes, Spencer.
I'd be happy to, it's pretty easy to find, to get access to cities that already have programs and to find out what the feedback is like. So I can wander off and into the blogosphere and, find that stuff out. I think it'd be probably best to look for cities of 60 or 70,000 people. And,
We have 100,000.
Oh, wow.
We are 100
area. Yeah,
we're 100,000. And Spencer, if you would like, by no means do I want you to. I am sure that when Jenny gets here, she has done this before and she will have something in mind. It will be interesting to see what council directs. And like I said, when I tried bringing it up with Kurt, he started talking about the logistics around building this border commission. And then I realized that there was going to be a lot more questions before they would be answered.
Yeah, you're right. I'd forgotten she'd already done this. So maybe it's a good idea to wait till August.
And it's just an observation on my part that it seems that when I ask a question, a what question, like what do we want to do? That's a what question. I get answers of how it's not going to happen or how it's complicated. if I ask a what question, I actually would like a what answer. And then how is a totally different thing. And I have found it a technique with people who don't really want to engage with me, where they'll do that. They'll start with I'll start with a very specific what question, and they'll distract it into something so convoluted that reasonable people give up. And I just hope not to hear very much of that.
I would also add that this won't make anyone feel better, but even in the last month, between the firework ban and the hiring of the city manager, we've just had so much. And so people have forgotten, and that's not okay. And so it is okay to email, and it is okay to call in and testify, because we do care. It's just hard with all of the things that we're trying to get done. It's not an excuse. It's just the reality of being part-time counselors in the city. Someone else was about to say something.
I was just going to thank you, because I really appreciate the extensive research that Spencer has done in bringing this to light. And I think it will be a continuing dialogue. I also know that our wonderful HR director, Patricia, is here, and I wanted to make sure we were respectful of her time and also your time to be with your family, Councilor Hasan. You're looking quite festive today. But we really appreciate your connection to council and your advice as to how we can really be most effective and targeted.
I will drop my email in the chat. I think y'all have it. But if anything comes to mind, feel free to shoot me a note. Otherwise, I will make sure to connect with Paolo on the cliff notes of tonight's meeting.
Great. That's wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Have a great celebration.
Thank you.
All right. Shall we move over to our HR director? Thank you so much for making the space to be here tonight.
I think that the thank you is from me to you to accommodate me at your meeting. I am so blessed always to be with HRAC. We consider you partners, and you have never disappointed us in giving us real, candid, useful feedback for the things that we're doing. And I see a Kitty there. Hi, Kitty. So I'm here to talk to you about Title VI and to make a request of you. So we have a Title VI program, which really is an anti-discriminatory program that is a federal law that prohibits any kind of discrimination on the basis of 3 protected classes: race, color, and national origin. The city has a Title VI program. I can tell you Alexis Ball has worked very well. Years ago, when Alexis was given this program, she was very new to Title VI, and she has ensured that the city is kept compliant. We have a plan, we have a reporting structure. We work with Paolo on the language access pieces to ensure that documents are translated into our 7 target languages. And so we are now at a point where we're updating the plan. And in updating the plan, there are some new and better practices and that we've been doing. So we've been trying to adopt both best practices and updating any federal requirements. One of the things that we recognize is that we need to have an advisory body. And so we're recommending that HRAC is the advisory body for the Title VI plan. And the Title VI plan really is about ensuring that the city in all its programs is understanding of the need to ensure that our subcontractors, our contractors, our employees, you know, in our dealings out, that nothing that the city does is discriminatory, whether by intent or by accident, against these protected classes. And how Title VI works is because it's one of the the titles in the Civil Rights Act. You know, we have Title II, we have Title VII, we have Title IX, we have Title VI, we have all the titles. And so we have Title III too, Title IV. So what happens is that with Title VI, it's very narrowly focused. But when a complaint comes into the city, we're not just going to say to the person who is either reporting the violation or the perception of that violation, or the person who is the recipient or on the end of, you know, being the one who is feeling discriminated against because of what the city does. So when reports come in, we're going to say, okay, how do we handle these? What falls into the Title VI bucket? What falls into the Title II bucket? What is an employee-related complaint that needs to go through the HR process? So we're going to manage those well, but we don't want anybody in the city to be chilled by not having a place to report any perception of discrimination as a result of the city's programs, services, or practices. So in coming to talk to you about this, I wanted to find out how HRAC felt about being closer aligned with the Title VI program and being a body that would advise us when we review our plans, when we update our plans, and we would also be giving you our annual report and ensuring that we have a body that can say to us, this is what we're noticing on the outside, or this is what we're hearing from the community, or helping us be proactive. This is what we really need to be doing. There's lack of education, if that's the case. There's lack of understanding where to report, if that's the case. There's lack of response that we're hearing. This is the feedback we're hearing from the community. So that's why I'm here tonight and wanted to find out if you have any questions for me. And how do you feel about that? I only have 15 minutes. So I took 7 and I'm giving you 7. And if you need me to come back, I'll come back. But we asked Paolo for a little time with short notice.
I think this is an exceptional request, and I won't assume to speak on everyone's behalf, but I believe that our response will be a unanimous yes. This is exactly the kind of space that we feel like we can be effective in, and I will leave it open for other people to comment. Is this something where when we receive the report, that we are then taking space to digest that and then report back to you? How would the process of that work?
We could develop that together, but what we would want to do is to ensure that when we do the report, and you read the report, because it will be coming from me, and we will also have to send the report to ODOT annually. But it would be good to have a body that would be able to reflect with me on the report, probably before the report comes out or before we have any incidents of reporting, be able to give me feedback as partners for the program to help us get better. That's what we really want to do, to help us mitigate faster, to help us get better in how we're managing the report, the program. So the report itself, when it comes to you, would be a factual report. It would be exactly what happened, how many cases we were reported, how did we mitigate, the time we took, did we follow up, not follow up. So there are certain benchmarks that we'll have to meet. When you get that report, if you see in it a trend of us not meeting those benchmarks, it would be a conversation that we would want to have. But I'm hoping that I would be smarter than that, and I'll be coming to you to say, help me, HRAC. I am seemingly not able to get people to follow through with a report, or get a reporting party to follow through with a claim. Because sometimes people report to us, but they only say to us, for example, somebody might say, I am a person from another country, and I am not finding a way to report discrimination. So that could be itself a report. My job is to research why that's happening. Is there website accessibility issues? Do I need to partner with the ADA folks, the Title II folks, to say, let's think about website accessibility, because my person over here who is reporting based on Title VI can't report because there's a barrier. So those are things that we would be looking at together in the report. The report is for you to digest, give me feedback, and ensure that we're doing well. Hopefully we don't have things to correct, but if we do, it will be before then.
This is really exciting. So it isn't only the report, it could even be an ongoing conversation if
I'm hoping.
came up in between the report, that we would be able to be effective with that. Joy,
I'm
please.
asking you to be my partner.
We are so excited. I can tell.
So my question is, what is this thing you're asking us to, is this a Title VI project?
No, so Title VI is a law, right, that requires us to have certain benchmarks. We need, and we're not very active. Alexis has done a really great job, I have to tell you that. So when you see her, congratulate her. But she just doesn't have the bandwidth for it. But what Title VI is, it's just a law that says, city, this is how you are to operate. You are to ensure that these notices are present, that every contract, every document you have that's outward facing, that provides services and programs, has that has this information. That pretty much says no person should be discriminated against, and tells people where to report if they're discriminated against, and tells them what to expect. So it's something that we're already doing. It's just that in updating our plan, we see that there are some best practices we could adopt. And this is one of them. Having a partnership with an advisory board is one of those best practices. And I can tell you, because I've worked with HRAC, and HRAC is not an advisory to HR. I thought it was in the beginning, but somewhere along it changed before I got here. So I still, when I need you, still send things to you or come to you, because I still consider your partner. But this would be a formalized structure where HRAC is an oversight body or a partnership body with the Title VI program.
Excellent. I look forward to talking with the group a little bit more about it. And it feels like an exciting opportunity to me. Joy, you have some more questions. You're very, very good at being discerning.
Well, I could make the motion, because we should be discussing it with a motion on the floor.
Great. Would you like to make the motion?
Certainly. I make a motion that we work with the Title VI program with the city of Beaverton. Discussion.
Well, I think we all know where I stand.
Okay.
Chair.
Do we need to call the question? Oh, I see a hand, Kathy.
Kathy.
I have a lot of questions. And it's because I worked in an institution where there was somebody who did this. And so she was the point person. If we were the advisory body, what kind of training would each of us need to become expert enough to do it? And would it be more efficient just to have an advisory group of 2 or 3 people who were very well trained, whom were trustworthy, instead of a big group like us? We are volunteers. So what kind of time commitment would be part of this? And would there be staff working with us? Because it is really a big, big job. So those are all my questions. And for myself, I'd like a long discussion about what it would look like, what it would require, and so on. It would require a lot for all of us to become experts, I think.
So I can start by saying that I would definitely need to come back and spend some time with you so you understand the Title VI program. And we will be learning together as well. And so we have a Title VI document. I want to share with you very briefly. My time is up. Can I get another 2 minutes?
Yes.
Okay, so I want to share with you very briefly the process. So the draft of the plan is done. We have to send it to ODOT. The plan just includes what the city is doing to prevent discrimination. What do we do in order to respond to reports of discrimination? And how do we do our checks and balances to ensure that those don't occur again? So that draft plan is being done. There's a Title VI plan currently on the website. If you go to the city site and just type in Title VI, Roman numeral 5, and the capital I, you will see the Title VI plan. As I said, Alexis has done a great job. You would never believe that she's managing Title VI and all the other things that she's doing. So we have, we're going to go to City Council in August to present the first draft of the plan. We're going to have a work session with them, go through the plan. And I've been working with a Portland State University student by the name of Max Wedding. And so we have updated the plan and the forms and all of that. Then we're going to have a 2-week comment period. And hopefully on September 14th, City Council will adopt the plan. And the plan, the Title VI plan is very similar to the diversity, equity and inclusion plan. And Max was with you last month. Do you remember Max Wedding? Yes.
Yes.
Very solid person who does solid work. I've met him before in my previous job. We both worked together on several things. One of them including Title IX, which is concerning colleges and universities and schools. So we would be I would be coming to you and giving you training. There's a PowerPoint presentation that I have that I'll present to council, and I'd love to present that to you as well after I present it to council. And so I'm sure that Paula will help me. And then I will also be able to answer questions, walk us through. But to be honest, it's not a lot that you have to learn. You just have to know that we cannot discriminate against persons. And Title VI covers 3 basic areas: race, color, national origin. And you would need to learn where the forms are in case you need to go by themselves. So I will walk you through the website. And I'm going to be working internally with several folks on deliverables and all of that. So I can send you all the information that you would need, and invite you to be there at council as well. I don't believe it's going to take any additional time out of your day outside of your HRAC meeting, to be honest. And if it does, we would have to have a conversation, because that should not be the intent. And you said you're volunteers. You remind me of AmeriCorps. AmeriCorps does not use the word volunteers, they use the word members, because folks come out every day to give their best. And it's something that if you were to take away from them, they wouldn't let go of. So I appreciate you for the fact that you have a passion that takes you into this space every day. So I know the city is very, very grateful.
Thank you so much. Mercy, did you have a question you wanted to ask? I know Patricia's time is very limited, and I can see we're going to need to table this discussion because we have a lot of commentary, and I think there's some rich conversation that we have to discuss here. Mercy?
Well, my question wouldn't be going to her. I just said, thank you for coming with that. I just wanted us to have a moment, like Catherine said, and you initially mentioned, this is a very great opportunity to get involved with what is going on and the invitation, but it need time. Like you said, you're going to sit with us so we can talk about it. And we need to know more about it. Like the Title 6 is on the site. We're going to look at it. I just think that it's very interesting that she will come to ask us to be part of it. But at the end of the day, we don't want to just say we will do it. Some of us like to really do stuff, but because we are so involved with so many things, so we need to just process it and see what is really going to be involved, just like everybody said, so before we come back to her. So I'm not going to really speak directly to her. I don't have a question, but I just want to say, let's come back to her and move on to the program. And then, talk about it among us when there's no visitor.
Wise perspective. And thank you for presenting us with this opportunity. We are looking forward to discussing it and getting back in touch where we have the privilege of having you back on. That will be wonderful.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me here. And as I said, it should not be a lot of work for you. I don't even envision that there's going to be any work for you outside of me coming annually for a report. But my style is not to come annually. I'd want to come, at a time when you would like to hear what's going on to ensure that you know what's going on with the program.
Well, thank you again. We appreciate the opportunity to consider this.
Thank you so much for having me. Thanks, Paolo, for making space for us, despite a very packed agenda.
Thank you, Patricia. We'll follow up.
All right. Always good to see you all. It's always good to see you. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll see you too.
Stephanie,
Yes.
before you restart, who seconded Joey's motion?
No one.
Stephanie.
I'm sorry?
No one.
Oh,
Perhaps you can put me down as seconding the motion, but Spencer, so I'll second the motion, but clearly we need to table this. Is there a process for tabling it, Joy?
We just leave it on the table.
Okay, we're going to leave it on the table because we have Greg Brown here from the attorney's office, and we want to make sure we're respectful of his time. So, Paolo, is it okay if we move over to Greg and have him do his part and then return to the rest of our agenda after?
Yeah, I think that'd be great. It was really cool to see Greg sign on early because we could go ahead and do that. And so
Great to see him.
Thank you for coming, Greg.
cool.
Thank you. You're absolutely welcome, folks. It's a pleasure to be in front of you.
Yeah, I could help provide a little bit of context. Greg, thank you so much for being here. So at last month's meeting, if y'all recall, there was quite a bit of discussion about the trespass agreement. And y'all had requested if we could have somebody from the attorney's office who could come and join the next HRAC meeting. So I was just all across, like knocking on their door and whatnot and talking to Abigail, and we got Greg. I'm so grateful. And Greg's here to answer some questions about the trespass agreement. And yeah, I'll let y'all take it away. Greg, if you want to go ahead and jump in.
Sure. Yeah, thanks. Again, good evening, folks. I figured I'd tell you just a little bit about who I am. My name is Greg Brown. I am one of the 2 city prosecutors here at the city of Beaverton. Officially, I am within the city attorney's office. And in addition to doing what you might call traditional criminal prosecution work, I also provide legal counsel to various city departments. And so that includes the Beaverton Police Department, as well as certain sections of the CDD, as well as anything else that the city really kind of needs me to do. So I represent the city both in criminal court and then also to, if the city winds up in civil court, I'm one of the trial attorneys. So I've been a lawyer for about 5 years. I went to law school at UCLA and graduated in 2016. and then moved my family up here to Oregon, from where I'm from, which is San Francisco, California. And then I've been a resident of Tigard for the last, well, since I've been up here. So there you go. I don't want to cut anybody off or sort of deny any perspectives here or anything like that. Oh, goodness. Okay.
Yeah, you keep breaking up.
Oh, no. Well, that's no good. Wonder. Here, you know what? I'm going to look like a big dork, but I'm going to put on a big pair of headphones that has a microphone on it. So maybe it'll be better for us.
You can even take off your tie. It's okay.
I'm on the clock. All right, so is that?
It's worse.
How
How about now? Better? Worse? Now?
my end?
Okay. All right. So, I won't repeat all of that. What I'll just say is I'm here because I'm one of the 2 city prosecutors. I work very closely with Beaverton Police Department. I'm also part of the team that provides the Beaverton Police Department with legal counsel. My focus is more on trial work, but I do a fair amount of advice work with Beaverton Police Department. So that's everything from sort of weighing in on certain contracts that they get involved in, all the way through helping to supplement the training that they receive through providing legal updates. I go to briefing, do question and answer sessions with the officers, basically do everything I can to make sure that the officers are in the field, really have a good understanding of what the law is currently, as well as from my unique perspective as the person that's actually taking many of the cases that they refer to me all the way through to trial. So I don't want to cut anybody off or deny anybody's perspective at all. So I would very much appreciate it if we could keep this open-ended, and if anyone has any specific questions, I'm more than happy to address them sort of as they come up. You can just ask my wife. It's very rarely difficult to get me to keep talking. So please jump in if you have questions. I'm here to talk to you guys today about the Trespass Agreement Program. I don't want to go ahead and, again, stop anybody from saying anything, but I'm pretty well aware of sort of what the context is around this. I actually watched the meeting from last month, so I'm pretty well briefed on kind of what's going on, and I'm more than happy. I kind of put together a very brief, like 7-slide PowerPoint. I promise it's only 7 slides. Well, actually, hang on. Before I make that promise, let me see. Is it 7 or is it 8? Oh my God, it's actually 9. It's 9 slides, including the title slide. So I hope I haven't lost credibility with you guys at this point. But I'm more than happy.
Yeah.
What's that?
We would really love to see it. So
Yes, please.
To start.
All right.
Present.
Yeah. Let's just go ahead and do this. All right, we're gonna see if I have mastered the screen share function on Zoom at this point.
It's a brave new world.
All right.
Looks good. We can see it.
Yeah, that sounds great. All right, perfect. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and minimize my video because I don't know how to do the presentation without you guys seeing my video and getting maybe a crazy mirror effect. So I'm going to minimize that. So I can't see if anybody has their hand up at this point. So just jump in with audio if you have questions. All right, so obviously we're here to talk about the Beaverton Police Department Trespass Agreement Program. Tonight, basically, I'm going to go over 3 things with you, sort of what is the trespass agreement program? What's the legal effect of a person in charge of a business entering into a trespass agreement with the Beaverton Police Department, including what it does and what it doesn't do. And I'll talk to you just a little bit about sort of the scope of the program. But the bottom lines are really these. It's a program of limited but crucial scope that assists the Beaverton Police Department in protecting private property interests. So the key takeaway there is that this is a very limited program, and it has an effect in just about 3% of trespassing cases. But the effect it has is critical, because without a trespass agreement, we wouldn't necessarily have the ability to protect the private property interest of this particular business in these particular times. So it's one of those things that, yeah, it only affects 3% of the cases, but it's a good 3%. The agreement itself has been reviewed by the CA's office. It was reviewed by one of the city attorneys before I got here, and then I separately reviewed it myself before presenting to you. And I've actually enforced the agreement once or twice over my career as a prosecutor. I wouldn't say that it is a linchpin program by any means. I describe it more as sort of a like the airbag in your car, okay? It's one of those things that you hope you never need it, but it's kind of a good thing if you do end up needing it. And from my perspective, it appears that the agreements are being lawfully applied by the Beaverton Police Department. Another key sort of takeaway about the trespass agreement program is that the participation in the program is wholly voluntary and it's freely revocable, okay? So it's a limited program of crucial scope. It's lawful, it's being lawfully applied as far as I can tell, and participation in the program is voluntary. So the major points within the agreement is that it is an agreement between the lawful person in charge of the business and the Beaverton Police Department. So I'm going to wrap the phrase person in charge in quotation because that is what lawyers call a term of art. It has a specific definition. It is specifically statutorily defined, and it matters. So a person in charge is basically anybody who represents the business, okay? So it's a representative, employee, of the person who has lawful control over the premises, whether that's by ownership, renting, whatever it is, that's a person in charge as defined by the law. So one of the things that that is somewhat obvious, but I think kind of bears repeating, is when somebody is an owner of property, they have a certain, it's often described as a bundle of sticks that make up all of the different rights that you have in property. One of those rights is called the right to exclude, and it is exactly what it sounds like. It basically says, look, absent certain exceptions, a business owner can exclude just about anybody that they want from the premises for just about any reason, but the exceptions are certainly important. So for example, a lot of businesses that are open to the public, both in Oregon and throughout the nation, have restrictions on, for example, unfairly excluding or denying services based on, certain characteristics like race, sex, gender orientation in Oregon and a few other states, right? But absent those exceptions, property owners have the right to exclude people from their property. The agreement itself allows any Beaverton Police Department officer to act as a person in charge of the property for the limited and sole purpose of excluding persons from the property if they violate a certain number of conditions. Okay. It exists alongside the other persons in charge of the business. So just because a business owner enters into this agreement and says, you know, Beaverton PD, I like what's in this agreement. I would want somebody excluded from my property if they violated one of the criteria that I hope you guys have. If not, I can provide it to you. That is part of the agreement, and I give you the authority to exclude them. That's really it. Okay. There are a few other provisions within the agreement, but that's sort of the bulk of what the agreement talks about, and that's what the intent of the agreement is. Oh, really quick, I did receive the Word document that was prepared by the commission that outlined some concerns. I think one of the concerns was, why is the chief of police listed on the trespass agreement? And that's because the Beaverton Police Department sort of acts under the authority of Chief Groshong, and because it is an agreement between the person in charge and the Beaverton Police Department, the agreement is being made on behalf of the chief, right? Because she is ultimately sort of responsible and bears the weight of the Beaverton Police Department when it comes to entering into these agreements. Even if she was to enter into a contract or something like that, that contract is often entered into and signed by Chief Groshong on behalf of the Beaverton Police Department. So I know it looks a little bit weird and possibly a little bit intimidating to sort of list the chief's name on there. That's the reason why it's on there. So let's see here. I think maybe I jumped ahead in my presentation. So an officer can issue an exclusion if and only if the officer has a reasonable suspicion that a person on the premises has violated one of these things. Okay. Reasonable suspicion is another term of art. We could easily fill several days of a law school class talking about what reasonable suspicion is. Suffice to say that the most basic definition of it is that it is a subjective belief on the part of the officer that is objectively reasonable under all the facts and circumstances. So often this comes up in criminal cases when a defense attorney argues that somebody was stopped without reasonable suspicion. Okay, that's a very common sort of motion that we end up arguing. And so it has this subjective component to it that, if it's challenged after the fact, has to be objectively reasonable. This is a standard that the police officers are trained on. They know what it means. Because it factors into a lot of different aspects of their work. So that reasonable suspicion phrase is a working definition that officers are familiar with, and it's something more than just a hunch. It's something more than just, this guy looks shady. Okay. And the things that an officer can exclude somebody for includes if they violate any Oregon law. I know there was a note in there about sort of this seeming legalistic, and I guess it kind of does, but when you're an attorney, you see something like ORS and it doesn't seem that weird. I totally get that to a layman, seeing something like that could appear to be a little weird, but I think the reason why it's abbreviated the way it is because it can actually direct people to the definition of what a lot of these terms are. So in Oregon law, ORS stands for Oregon Revised Statute. Mostly it's going to be the criminal code, which includes all of the crimes that you can think of. That's the criminal code. The Beaverton City Code. The Beaverton City Code encompasses a bunch of ordinances, some of which are criminal in nature, some of which are civil in nature, and has a few laws that it don't maybe exist at the state level, but exist at the municipal level. And then there are a couple of other criteria that can get you excluded. The agreement references this attached exclusion criteria that I hope you guys have. And again, I'm more than happy to provide it to you if you don't. There was a concern that maybe, well, if we don't spell out the exclusion document, you know, within the text of the signed agreement, you know, how does anybody kind of know, or how does a court know what the parties are going to talk about, or is a court even going to consider it? And the answer to that is probably yes. So there is a concern about this thing called the four corners rule. The four corners rule is a concept in contract law that basically says in a contract dispute, if there exists a final written version of an agreement, like a contract, that is clear as to what the intent of the parties are, the evidence in the case is often limited to the four corners of the final agreement. However, there are a bunch of different exceptions to that. One is where it's clear from the text of an agreement that the intent of the parties is to be bound by some other document, okay? So in this case, this references the attached exclusion criteria. You know, the agreement doesn't say, we hereby incorporate by reference the exclusion criteria spelled out in Exhibit 1. And the language there could maybe be tightened up just a little bit. But in my opinion, this does a good job of being a little bit more straightforward than that, being a little bit more readable than that. And then also as well, if we ever wound up in litigation over the trespass agreement, I think any judge looking at this would say it's very clear that they meant to reference in this other document. So while it's not the absolute perfect magic language, I think what it loses in specificity, it makes up for a little bit in readability, which is sometimes a good thing. The other major points there is that if the Beaverton Police Department issues an exclusion to somebody, that exclusion lasts for 1 year unless a person in charge of the business tells Beaverton Police Department otherwise. So that's a big thing under the agreement, is even if an officer excludes somebody from the premises, at any point, the business owner is free to undo or overrule the decision of the officer. It advises the person in charge that they may consult with their own legal counsel, and that person can negotiate the terms of the agreement if they choose. There are a handful of trespass agreements that were actually negotiated with an attorney and have their own sort of terms associated with them. Most of the time, the basic terms are what people end up with. But certainly if there was a business who wanted to hire an attorney and say, hey, look, we want to do the trespass agreement program, but we have a problem with this specific term, that's something that I would probably be tapped to negotiate with the attorney. But the whole mindset behind the trespass agreement program is that it's a service to the community, that, you know, we're going to try to be as inclusive about as possible. And so, you know, unless there's a patently unreasonable request, like I'll only participate if you give me 5% of the city's tax revenue over the next 10 years, you know, then we might have a problem. But most of the time, we're very, very, very comfortable changing the language of the agreement. The agreement can also be terminated at any time, the entire agreement. So if the business changes hands or the business owner just plain doesn't want to deal with the trespass agreement program at all, at any time, they are allowed to just terminate the agreement, and that ends that relationship. It clarifies that the person in charge is only delegating authority to exclude, and that they're not going to get any special services or favoritism from BPD, which is kind of a big, I guess I would call it an equity point, or a clarifying point, which is just sort of like, hey, look, just because you're designating our officers as people who can exclude people from your premises, it doesn't mean that suddenly we're going to let you jump the line in the 911 call queue, right? And it's surprising that you would maybe need to spell that out for somebody, but the agreement does that. And finally, it protects the city in case of legal action on behalf of the business and arising solely based on the content of the agreement. I know there were some concerns about some of the protective clauses in the agreement. And I think the issues like qualified immunity and things like that, a lot of that doesn't really apply to these facts. That's a doctrine that often arises in individual circumstances, sometimes in city circumstances. But in a situation like this, this is really more of a contractual matter. And even if there exists a different doctrine that might be able to protect the city, it is absolutely best practice to make sure that we have overlapping areas of protection. So what the agreement doesn't do, it doesn't take anything away from the person in charge. That's the big part that the agreement tries to make very clear. So the person in charge retains the right to exclude persons from the premises themselves. So even though they are delegating the power to exclude somebody from the premises, they're not losing it themselves. They are not losing any right to be free of unreasonable searches and seizures without warrants. Again, there were some concerns sort of raised about the ability of police officers to enter into property without a warrant. That is another thing that could take a couple of weeks in a law school criminal procedure class. The basics of it is that unless a well-recognized exception to the requirement that officers have to get a warrant exists, they cannot enter onto premises without a warrant. There are a few well-recognized exceptions, but from a practical standpoint, if I'm a prosecutor and maybe my ability to prove a case hinges on our ability to get something from the business, and not only to get it, but to admit it in court, the best practice is absolutely to get a warrant. And very often, the advice to, when you're a prosecutor, to your law enforcement agency is simply get a warrant. And certainly nothing in this trespass agreement absolves officers of needing to get a warrant. Again, unless one of the exceptions applies, but participating in the trespass agreement program is not an exception to the warrant requirement. Doesn't take away anything about the right to govern the affairs of the business. As I said earlier, the business can always undo an exclusion and can completely leave the program at any time. And they still receive usual and ordinary police services. So even though we're not going to let you jump to the first spot in the line, if there are several calls for service before you and we are beyond our capacity for officers out on the road, we're also not taking away your police service if you participate in the program, or conversely, if you don't participate in the program, if you still called 911, an officer is going to show up to your business. So I think there's maybe some terminology here that also is contributed to what's going on, which is okay, this is called the Trespass Agreement Program because of the sort of common lingo in the law enforcement community regarding what it means to trespass somebody from a business. When we talk about trespassing somebody, what we're doing is we're really putting that person on notice that if they return to the business, they could be subject to arrest for trespassing. So to trespass somebody or to exclude somebody from the property, all it means is that you're getting a heads up that if you come back to the property, you might get arrested for trespass. So even if somebody is excluded from property, it doesn't always mean that there's going to be a trespassing charge. In fact, anecdotally, based on the vast majority of cases that I read every day, when somebody's arrested for trespass, there is a long history of it being documented that they were told several times that they can't be on the property, that the business owner didn't want them there for whatever reason. The exclusion is typically recorded by the officer issuing the exclusion, so it can be related in a later police report. As a prosecutor, right, I am more concerned if somebody has trespassed on a property 7 times than I am if somebody told them to leave the property and they didn't wait 10 minutes for them to leave the property, okay? And officers are really good about recording their exclusions so that we know who's excluded and so that they can tell me what the history of the case is. If an excluded person returns to the property, they can be arrested for criminal trespass 2. Criminal trespass 2 is a shorthand way of saying criminal trespass in the 2nd degree. There are several ways to commit criminal trespass in the 2nd degree. One of them is if a person enters or remains unlawfully in or upon premises. Enters or remains unlawfully is separately defined. It includes about 4 things, but the 2 most common are to fail to leave premises that are open to the public after being lawfully directed to do so by a person in charge, or to enter premises that are open to the public after being lawfully directed not to enter the premises. So there's sort of a chain that goes from exclusion to a later arrest for trespass. But if you get excluded from the property and you abide by the exclusion and you don't return to the property, you're not arrested for trespass. The scope of the program is very limited. So I said that it's limited to crucially applicable situations. It protects business owners in 2 primary situations. So the first one is someone on the property that the business owner would want to exclude and the person in charge can't be located. Again, the business owner retains the right to go ahead and exclude people themselves. So if the business is open, a business owner is free to exclude somebody, right? But a business owner who is participating in the trespass agreement program has told Beaverton Police Department, if you find somebody on my property and they're violating one of those criteria, go ahead and exclude them. So basically, the trespass agreement program really protects a business after it's closed. And the hypothetical I like to use is this. If somebody enters into a business, even if they are clad all in black with a ski mask and they're carrying a duffel bag marked burglary kit, if that person enters into a business that's been left unlocked, for example, by an employee, and they haven't committed any other crimes, and an officer goes ahead and finds them sort of in this preemptory position where I think almost anybody would assume that this person is reasonably up to no good. However, if there isn't a trespass agreement on file and the person says, yeah, the business gave me permission to be here, the officer cannot arrest that person because they haven't committed any crimes. If they didn't break anything when they entered into the business because they entered in through an unlocked door, and all they're doing so far is just standing in the business, an officer can't arrest because that person hasn't committed any crime. And also, if the officer doesn't have any reason to believe that the person is not associated with the business, so if they say, oh yeah, I know Joe Smith who owns the business, he told me I could be here, an officer can't arrest that person unless there's a trespass agreement on file. And the officer can't even really tell that person to leave the premises and don't come back tomorrow looking for the same unlocked door. That's where the trespass agreement comes in. Because even though we can't find somebody who's associated with the business, if the business owner has said, hey, look, if you find somebody on my property after close of business and they're there for more than 20 minutes and they don't have any other lawful authority to be there, go ahead and exclude them from the premises. And that's it. And if the person leaves voluntarily, at that point, even if they're standing there black clad with a ski mask and a burglary kit, they're not typically arrested. And then the other way that it makes sense is when the relationships or structure of a business make identifying a person in charge difficult because the person in charge of the business maybe isn't there, or they have a bunch of independent contractors working for them, or there is a sort of central, for example, shopping center or management for a large apartment complex. It can make finding out who the actual person in charge is very, very, very difficult. And there was a case I had a few years back, actually at the Washington County District Attorney's Office, that happened at a McDonald's. There was a white supremacist who came into the McDonald's and started chanting racial screeds. It was terribly upsetting for everybody involved. He used a lot of racial slurs towards the people of Latinx origins who worked there. But he didn't issue any direct threats. He didn't really kind of do anything other than just yell and make a lot of noise. Because a police officer happened to be in the restaurant or come into the restaurant pretty soon after that, the police officer is able to go ahead and exclude that person from the business right away without having to stop and wonder whether the fry cooks or, you know, the shift manager or whomever else is there really has the authority to exclude this person. And that ultimately is the sort of other component of this. And to give you an idea of how limited it is, there are 573 trespass agreements on file with Beaverton Police Department right now. Of the last 6 months, BPD has arrested 140 people for trespassing. 5% of those cases involve trespass agreements. So stated another way, about 97% of the trespass cases out there were because a business owner trespassed somebody, not because the police trespassed somebody. Again, it is a program that is of a limited scope that applies in some certain situations, but in the situations where it does kind of apply, I think our business owners are kind of glad it's there. And that's it.
Thank you so much. Do we have any questions? I know we have a very limited time. We may be sending you follow-up questions. That this was very extensive, and we appreciate the thorough legal analysis. But I'm certain that there are going to be a lot of questions.
I'm happy to address those questions. If you want to get something over to Mr. Esteban, I'm more than happy to answer those by email. And I also am more than happy to just sort of go through that Word document that I received, just sort of point by point and clarify as needed as well. That's also something I'm happy to do for you.
Thank you so much, Greg. We really appreciate your willingness to be available and to explain the legal aspects of this. Yeah, I feel like I just entered a law class.
Welcome to my world.
Thank you for that. I know there will be additional discussion. Our time is getting shorter and shorter, but thank you for coming, and we will definitely be following up with you. Thank you again for your time.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Greg.
Bye.
I wanted to make sure that we also retain space for Britt. The community safety work where we're doing the community art project. I know you and Dori have been working on that, and I want to make sure that we make time to see that some of the other items we may have to table. Britt, would you, I know it's quite an awkward transition here because my head is full of ideas and questions about the trespass agreement, but I want to make sure we make space for all of the work that you've done in the last month too.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about it. I thought Sabi was going to be here as well because I know that she was able to attend the last meeting, which I couldn't be at. But Dori did send around a couple updates, just basically highlighting that we're finishing up yesterday. We should have gotten all of the feedback from just our group of people working on the subcommittee for the questions. So we did get some feedback from the Beaverton Police Department on those, as well as I believe some other feedback from the group of us working on it. I did not get any updates about those specific comments. So I'm not sure. I know that I sent my thoughts to Dori. And then we are, I guess, reviewing the artists starting tomorrow. There was no actual date associated with it, but this was sent to me yesterday. So I believe it's this Thursday that the artists will be reviewed. And then Sabi, I believe, is also looking at locations. I know that I did recently get an update. Let's see if I can go back in my email.
I think, Britt, as you're looking for that, yeah, Sabdi is looking for locations and really events where it would make sense to pop up this art project and collect feedback from folks. One of the things that I just heard earlier, Lieutenant Stellingwerf, I know for those after night outs, I'm sorry, you said it earlier.
National Night Out.
National Night Outs. I'm wondering if that might be an opportunity or a place for this for these projects. Lieutenant Stellingwerf has also been really helpful and attending those meetings as well. So,
well, I don't functionally. I don't know, Paolo, because like I said, we're not hosting the event. So I guess if there's a neighborhood that decides they want to do it, I suppose that might be a possibility. But we'd have to know who the neighborhood is, and then somebody from HRAC would have to reach out to that neighborhood and say, we have this program, we'd like to try this. So there's a lot of things that would have to happen, I think, in this kind of model I'm talking about, without it being the like library or city park or anything like that.
Thank you.
Yes, so the only other thing that we had been discussing, which I think Dori wanted us to bring to you all, was if you guys had any last feedback about questions 1 and questions 3. There were 2 different versions that we had been working with. So the first for question 1, which I don't know if somebody, or I can copy these into the chat actually. So the first one is, what does a safe community for all people look like? And then the other version is, what does a safe community mean to you? So we were discussing what the connotation and difference between those is. And then the other was for question 3, which we were just solidifying. There are those 2. So how can we work together to make our community safe? And how can we as a community work to keep the community safe? So just a slight language difference there. But those were the last 2 questions that we were solidifying.
Those were in your notes, right? In the
What was that?
those were in your minutes.
I believe
I think-
so.
They
It was
were-
in an email that I got from Dori.
I think it was attached to this agenda in the last minutes and things like that. It should all be in there.
Perfect.
It looks like this.
Mhm.
So it's 3 or 4 pages, and then I think it's the 3rd page. Oh, 5th page in. Dori included page numbers.
What do we need to do to finalize those questions?
I think in her last email to the group, it was basically just discussing sort of what the connotation is and what our goal is. So for the first one, she wrote, what does a safe community for all people look like? This question asks folks to consider and imagine what would make a safe community for all members of the community. Whereas what does a safe community mean to you? Asks folks to consider what the ideal safe community means to them specifically. So it centers the person's perspectives of a safe community rather than thinking more generally. So sort of those small changes of how specifically we want to ask that question and what feedback we'd like to get from folks.
Can we have people email and Brett and Dori and Sapi for their responses and or whatever they don't receive, make a decision on that? How would we like to handle it? Because it seems like we need to solidify what those answers are going to be. And if there's opinions right now, then we should express those. Lieutenant Stellingwerf?
Yeah, I think that's, correct me if I'm wrong, Britt, but I think, isn't that what the meeting for Friday is at 4:30? I think we're having a meeting.
Yeah, so there is a meeting Friday at 4:30. I will not be there because I have another appointment, but I believe that is going to be like our final meeting to basically say, yes, this is what we're moving forward with. And then since the artist will start being reviewed tomorrow and Wasabi's research, I think that Friday is really going to be the critical, like this is our plan moving forward, how we're going to do it.
Great. Spencer?
Feedback in this space for sure. And I'm more than happy to share it. I'll be at that meeting.
Perfect.
Britt, do you guys want any input on how to ask questions specifically to younger children? I noticed there was in the minutes, there was some, the minutes were a little fuzzy around that issue.
Yeah, I think that our intention is to have questions that are the most accessible. This was part of my feedback that I did give to Dori about the suggestions that we got. So for the second version of the 3rd question, I suggested if we were going to go with that one, we add commas to make it read more clearly to somebody whose first language may not be English. But that is a concern that I did bring up to her, is how we make it to where anybody who is in this space could access the questions. I don't know that we've specifically talked about it. I wasn't in the last meeting, so I don't know if anything else was discussed. I don't know if Kathy was there. She may have more information on that specifically.
Yes, this was the most accessible that we came up with, and would definitely appreciate input, Spencer. There were so few of us wrestling with this.
How would you like the input?
You could email it right now or put it in the chat. If it's going to be short input, just put it in the chat and I'll copy it down on my copy of it. Or you could call and talk about it. However you think your input could best be communicated.
Okay. I'll probably email. Thank you.
Yeah, I would say email will probably be the best. I know that Dori is still traveling. So.
I think there was another question there. I think, Britt, you mentioned the accessibility piece. There is a plan to get the card whenever it's ready, translated in the 7 priority languages here at the city. So.
Great. It sounds like we have a final opportunity to put in some input, so please do so if you have some, and get that information to Britt and the team on the community art project, and then they will finalize that, it sounds like, in a couple of days at their next meeting. Correct, Britt?
My apologies. I was reading Amy's question. What was your question?
Oh, that it will be finalized at your next meeting. So people should get their input in soon.
Yes, if you have feedback that you would like to give us, I would say do that by end of day, probably tomorrow or very early on Friday. I know that the team is meeting at 4:30 Friday afternoon.
Great. And I did notice Amy put in some suggestions, and I also wanted to draw attention to Lisa's also family story time on the lawn at the library. So it sounds like there's some potential locations that we can consider, and we know that will be in your capable hands and start to be addressed. I'm particularly excited to hear about the artists that you'll be looking at and hearing how that continues to evolve. So thank you so much for that update. That's really really helpful. And then I wanted to go over to Joy also, because you have an update about council and our progress with them.
Right. So at the last city council meeting that they had, which was not yesterday, it was the week before, they had a roundtable discussion, and about an hour into the meeting, they took up our recommendations. And as Councilor Hasan said, she tried to read them into the record. And that did not happen. And I have lots of things to say. And it's been my feedback from city councilors and from other people around them that it does make a difference when we show up and speak at the public comment part, especially if we got together, or not together, if we, several of us talked about our recommendations that they're not taking up, haven't taken up 6 months in. So my thought was that I would encourage you to watch that city council discussion about our recommendations. It starts at about 1 hour, 1 hour 3. So you start at 1 hour 57 minutes, somewhere around there. And it doesn't go for that long. And if there was something that you wanted to say to any of those people, if you could let me know, that'd be great, just so I could coordinate and tailor my comments to kind of tie things up at the end. That would be very welcome. It makes a difference when we speak. So I don't know who saw that roundtable discussion. Let me encourage you. You want to, not for good reasons, in my humble opinion, and I'm completely biased. Tanya.
It looks like we have Tanya and Spencer. Are y'all raising your hands to speak at one of these next Tuesday meetings? Okay, I saw a nod from Tanya.
I was just going to second what Joy just said. If I could speak truth and use epithets, it was a blank show. It was unbelievable.
What day is that? What date of council, last week or?
Tuesday, 5:30.
Yes, no, but the one that you're saying review, which one was that?
Not yesterday. So it's the last day of June.
The last June, okay, thanks.
Kathy.
Thank you. I feel pretty strongly that as individuals, many of us have reminded the council of these recommendations. And I do think it's time, I'm hoping that HRAC will send an official letter to them, reminding them. And I think it would have more strength than us speaking as individuals, because our individual voices have not seemed to make a difference. Although at the last council meeting, they did say things like, well, HRAC is wanting us to get moving on this. And so I think that an assertive letter from HRAC would have more impact. We haven't had much impact.
So should we resend our recommendations to the city and say, hi, in case you forgot, we're here, we're waiting.
I would send our dismay and even ask them to do their work on it. And I would send Spencer's list also. They have been, one of the recent meetings, they said we need a report about what the legislature has done. And I was a bit surprised because to me it sounded like no one on the council had done that work.
Yeah,
To
I
see
was
what the
dismayed.
legislature had done. And the
Right.
list from Spencer is easy, falls into their lap, and it can be said, here you go. We can be assertive, but not be rude about it. We do not want to be rude. We do not want to be
No.
conflict.
No, then they'll
But-
stop listening. Yeah.
Yes, but I really think it's time, excuse me, for HRAC to make a united voice again.
Do you want to make a motion?
I move that HRAC create and send a letter to the city council regarding the recommendations on policing. And and more than a reminder.
I would second that.
Any discussion?
Is there somebody, so it looks like it passed, somebody second. Is there anybody who would like to?
And now it's open for discussion. It
Yeah,
hasn't
and it's
been
open
voted.
because-
Now we can talk about it.
Okay, I want that we are 3 minutes over, but that is something that totally, I'll take it away.
Kathy, would you like to put together a draft?
I would do it with a couple of other people. I know that Lisa is very good at wordsmithing. Who else? Cameron.
She
of
really
course.
is. Yeah.
Yes, Cameron, of course, is a lawyer, but maybe somebody from the executive council. Spencer has a lot of experience. The thing is that it's my opinion that everybody on this HRAC advisory board is really good with words. And so maybe people should just volunteer.
Lisa, that sounds great.
Yeah, Lisa's saying in the chat, if you're not reading it, Kathy, that if you write a draft, she would be happy to retool it and wordsmith it. So I think that's probably where we need to leave it right now, because we're already 5 minutes over our time. And then we have a lot of things to vote on. We have Patricia's suggestion to our our commission. We have Kathy's recommendation, which to the council, and we have a few things that we've missed on the agenda this time, including Spencer's resources and announcements that he has. He's been such a fantastic resource with that. But we're going to need to come to a close right now. Spencer, was there any last second things? I'm so sorry that we're kind of cutting you short on this. Are some of these things we can table for next time, or is there something immediate that we cannot miss?
There are only two things: the legislative information I sent out and that horror show of an article from BBC that Kathy sent out about how police are trained in the United States. That's it.
Thank you so much for alerting us and being so efficient with our time. I highly recommend that we pause for those resources. Clearly, our team has to regroup and make sure we get a few of these items back on the agenda. The community agreements we will revisit next month, and if you have a chance, Paolo set those out today and we can review those. But thank you for an extremely packed and productive meeting today. We certainly got a lot of intake and we'll be making a lot of decisions in our forthcoming meetings. So thank you again. I appreciate your time this evening. We'll talk to you later. Good night.